waters turning to blood, locust swarms so massive they blot out the sun, earthquakes shaking cities to rubble, the moon turning red in the night sky. These aren't scenes from a Hollywood disaster movie. These are real events, documented, verified, and happening right now, all across our world. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the book of Revelation described a series of catastrophic signs that would mark the end of an age, and millions of people believe those signs are appearing before our very eyes. But is there a rational explanation for all of this? Are we seeing climate change, natural cycles, and coincidence, or is something deeper unfolding? In this episode, we examine the evidence, the science, the scripture, and the question no one can seem to answer. Are the signs of Revelation happening right now? This is Biblical Mysteries. Welcome to Revelation Decoded, Episode 2. Let's begin with one of the most striking signs described in Revelation. Chapter 8, verse 8. Quote, "And the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain, burning with fire, was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood." And again in chapter 16, verses 3 and 4. "The second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood like that of a dead person, and every living thing in the sea died. The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood." For centuries, these passages were understood as metaphor or distant prophecy. But in recent years, something extraordinary has been happening to bodies of water all around the world. Lake Urmia in northwestern Iran, once one of the largest saltwater lakes on Earth, it began turning a startling blood-red color. Satellite images captured the transformation, and the images went viral around the world. Scientists identified the cause as Dunaliella salina, a type of algae that produces red pigments under high salinity conditions. As the lake shrank due to drought, the salt concentration rose, and the algae bloomed, turning the water crimson. Bondi Beach, Australia. In November 2012, one of the world's most famous beaches was closed when the ocean turned a deep, unsettling red. Swimmers fled the water. News helicopters circled overhead. The cause? A massive bloom of red algae called Noctiluca scintillans, the Yangtze River, China's lifeline. In September 2012, residents of Chongqing woke to find their river had turned blood red overnight. Authorities investigated for days. Some pointed to industrial pollution. Others blamed natural sediment from heavy rains upstream, the Daldekan River in Siberia, Russia. In 2016, this remote river turned a shocking crimson. Residents posted photos online that spread worldwide. A nearby nickel plant was eventually blamed for the contamination, and it doesn't stop there. The Sea of Azov, the Beirut River in Lebanon, waterways in the Netherlands, Texas, Iraq, and Indonesia. Over the past 2 decades, reports of waters turning red have appeared on every inhabited continent. Scientists have identified multiple natural causes: red algae blooms, often called red tides, iron oxide contamination, industrial pollution, changes in mineral content. Each individual case has a scientific explanation, but here's what some find troubling: the sheer number of events, the fact that they're occurring simultaneously across the globe, and the unavoidable visual parallel to one of the most specific prophecies in Revelation. Climate scientists point to rising ocean temperatures as the primary driver. Warmer waters create ideal conditions for algal blooms. As global temperatures rise, so does the frequency of these events. For many researchers, this is a consequence of human-caused climate change, not divine intervention. But biblical scholars who study prophecy see something different. They point out that Revelation doesn't specify what causes the waters to turn to blood. It simply says they will. And if the mechanism is algae blooms triggered by climate change, that doesn't necessarily exclude a prophetic explanation. It may simply be how the prophecy is being fulfilled. The question isn't whether these events are happening. They are. The question is whether their timing, their scale, and their global nature are coincidence or something more. Now let's turn to one of the most terrifying images in all of Revelation. Chapter 9, verse 3. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. The description continues in verses 7 through 9. The shapes of the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like human faces. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. Now, many scholars debate whether Revelation is describing literal locusts or something else entirely. Some see this as symbolic of armies or spiritual forces. But what is undeniable is that the book of Joel, another prophetic text, also warns of devastating locust swarms as a sign of judgment. Joel chapter 2. A great people and a strong. There has never been anything like it, nor will there ever be again, even for many generations. A fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. In late 2019 and early 2020, East Africa experienced locust swarms unlike anything the region had seen in decades. Kenya faced its worst infestation in 70 years. Ethiopia and Somalia in 25 years. The numbers were staggering. A single swarm could cover an area of over 2,400 square kilometers. That's roughly the size of Moscow, and each swarm contained billions of individual locusts. The devastation was catastrophic. These swarms devoured crops in hours that had taken months to grow. The United Nations warned that over 20 million people faced severe food insecurity as a direct result. But it wasn't just East Africa. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Pakistan, and India all reported major locust outbreaks in the same period. The swarms crossed oceans and national borders with terrifying speed. In India, swarms reached cities that hadn't seen locusts in decades. Residents reported the sky turning dark in the middle of the day. The sound of billions of wings was described as a roar. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization called it a crisis of unprecedented proportions. They mobilized emergency response teams across multiple countries. Billions of dollars were spent on aerial spraying operations, but for every swarm destroyed, more appeared. The locusts were breeding faster than they could be controlled. Climate scientists traced the outbreak to an unusual weather event. Cyclones in the Indian Ocean had deposited heavy rainfall across the Arabian Peninsula, creating moist, sandy conditions that were ideal for desert locust breeding. Warmer ocean temperatures made these cyclones more frequent and more intense. For those who study prophecy, the explanation doesn't diminish the significance. The book of Joel warned that locusts would come as a judgment, and it didn't specify the meteorological mechanism. What matters, they argue, is the scale and timing, an outbreak of biblical proportions, occurring in the very region where the Bible's events took place. Whether you see climate science or divine prophecy, one thing is certain. The world witnessed swarms that matched descriptions written thousands of years ago, and few were prepared for it. Earthquakes. They are among the most dramatic signs described in biblical prophecy. In Revelation chapter 6, verse 12, I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. Jesus himself, in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, verse 7, warned, "Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." And in Luke chapter 21, verse 11, "And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven." February 2023, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck southern Turkey and northern Syria. Over 50,000 people were killed. Entire cities were reduced to rubble in seconds. September 2023, a magnitude 6.8 earthquake hit Morocco's Atlas Mountains. Thousands died. Ancient villages that had stood for centuries were leveled overnight. Japan 2024, a powerful earthquake struck the Noto Peninsula on New Year's Day. Indonesia, Nepal, Afghanistan. The list of devastating earthquakes in recent years is long and growing, but here's where it gets complicated. Are earthquakes actually increasing? This is one of the most debated questions in both science and prophecy circles. The United States Geological Survey maintains detailed records going back to the early 20th century. And the data shows something interesting. The number of detected earthquakes has increased dramatically, but that's largely because our detection technology has improved enormously. In the 1930s, there were about 350 seismic stations worldwide. Today, there are thousands equipped with instruments sensitive enough to detect tremors that would have gone completely unnoticed a century ago. We're recording more earthquakes because we have more instruments listening. When scientists focus specifically on major earthquakes, magnitude 7 and above, the frequency has remained relatively stable over the past century. The Earth has always been seismically active, but here's what has changed: the impact. As global population grows and cities expand onto seismically active zones, the human cost of earthquakes has risen dramatically. More people live in more vulnerable places than ever before. Geologists will tell you that plate tectonics explain earthquakes entirely. The Earth's crust is broken into massive plates that shift, collide, and separate. Earthquakes are inevitable. They are not increasing in frequency. We are simply more aware of them. Those who study prophecy make a different argument. They point out that Scripture doesn't just predict more earthquakes, it predicts earthquakes in diverse places, unusual locations, and several recent earthquakes have struck areas not known for seismic activity. They also note that the combined impact of earthquakes, paired with all the other signs, creates a pattern that goes beyond geology alone. The debate continues, but whether you interpret earthquakes through the lens of science or scripture, their destructive power remains undeniable. Few images capture the apocalyptic imagination quite like the blood moon. That haunting crimson glow that occasionally transforms our familiar moon into something alien and foreboding. The prophet Joel wrote in chapter 2, verse 31, "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes." And Revelation chapter 6, verse 12, "I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood." Peter, in the book of Acts chapter 2, verse 20, repeated Joel's prophecy. The sun will be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. Scientifically, a blood moon is simply a total lunar eclipse. When Earth passes directly between the sun and the moon, sunlight bends through our atmosphere, filtering out blue light and casting a deep red glow onto the moon's surface. It's called Rayleigh scattering, the same phenomenon that makes sunsets red. But in 2014 and 2015, something rare occurred. 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses, a tetrad, fell precisely on Jewish feast days, Passover and Sukkot, 2 years in a row. This alignment, which happens only a handful of times per century, ignited a firestorm of prophetic speculation. Pastors Mark Biltz and John Hagee brought the blood moon theory to millions. Biltz first identified the pattern, and Hagee's best-selling book, 4 Blood Moons, argued that these celestial events coincided with major turning points in Jewish and world history. They pointed to historical precedent. A tetrad occurred in 1493 and 1494, following the expulsion of Jews from Spain. Another in 1949 and 1950, just after the founding of the State of Israel. And again in 1967 and 1968, coinciding with the Six-Day War and the recapture of Jerusalem. And it's not just blood moons. The Great American Eclipse of 2017, followed by another crossing the nation in 2024, forming an X over the United States, captured the imagination of millions who wondered whether these celestial events carried deeper meaning. Astronomers are quick to point out that lunar eclipses are predictable and recurring events. They follow precise mathematical cycles. A tetrad falling on Jewish holidays is notable, but not miraculous. The Jewish calendar is lunar-based, so the alignment is more likely than it might first appear. But for those who believe Scripture foretells celestial signs, predictability doesn't diminish meaning. God, they argue, created the celestial mechanics. If the moon turns to blood on appointed feast days, according to cycles set in motion at creation, that could be design, not coincidence. What we can say with certainty is this: the ancient texts describe the moon turning to blood. The moon does turn to blood. Whether you call it prophecy or physics depends on the framework through which you view the universe. The prophet Hosea, chapter 4, verse 3, "Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwells in it shall languish, with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away." And Zephaniah, chapter 1, verse 3, "I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of the heaven and the fishes of the sea." In recent years, mass animal die-offs have become disturbingly common. In 2011, over 5,000 red-winged blackbirds fell dead from the sky over Beebe, Arkansas, on New Year's Eve. The incident made international headlines. The same week, tens of thousands of dead fish washed ashore along the Arkansas River. In the days that followed, similar mass die-offs were reported in Louisiana, Kentucky, Sweden, and Brazil. Mass whale strandings have occurred with alarming frequency. In 2017, over 600 pilot whales stranded in New Zealand. In 2023, dozens of whales beached along the U.S. East Coast, sparking public alarm and scientific debate. Colony collapse disorder. Since the mid-2000s, honeybee populations have plummeted worldwide. Entire hives have been found abandoned. No dead bees, no obvious cause. They simply vanished. Scientists have pointed to pesticides, parasites, and habitat loss. But the mystery isn't fully resolved. The USGS tracks mass mortality events. Their data shows a clear upward trend over the past 50 years. More species, more events, more unexplained die-offs than at any point in recorded history. And beneath the waves, coral reefs are dying at unprecedented rates. In 2023 and 2024, the world experienced its worst global coral bleaching event ever recorded. These underwater ecosystems, home to millions of species, are disappearing before our eyes. Environmental scientists attribute these events to a combination of factors: pollution, rising temperatures, habitat destruction, and disease. Each incident can be studied and explained within known ecological frameworks. But for those who read the prophets, the pattern is unmistakable. The beasts of the field, the fowls of the heaven, the fishes of the sea, all being taken away, just as Hosea described thousands of years ago. Whether the mechanism is ecological collapse or divine judgment, the result is the same. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, verses 25 and 26. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. Matthew chapter 24 describes a world in upheaval. Famines, pestilences, earthquakes, and all of these, Jesus said, are the beginning of birth pains, not the main event, the warm-up. The numbers speak for themselves. The years 2023 and 2024 were the hottest ever recorded in human history. Global temperature records were shattered, month after month after month. Catastrophic flooding devastated communities across the globe. Pakistan's 2022 floods submerged 1/3 of the entire country. 33 million people were affected. The damage was estimated at over $30 billion. While some regions drowned, others baked. Extreme drought gripped the American Southwest, Southern Europe, and the Horn of Africa. Lakes and reservoirs dropped to historic lows. Rivers that had flowed for millennia ran dry. Hurricanes and typhoons have grown more intense. Rapid intensification, where storms strengthen dramatically in just hours, has become increasingly common. What were once rare Category 5 storms now form with alarming regularity. Temperature extremes have broken records on both ends. Record heat waves in the northern hemisphere have been followed by record-breaking winter storms. The weather itself seems to be growing more violent, more unpredictable, more extreme. The data is clear. Earth's climate is changing at a pace not seen in millions of years. Every major scientific organization on the planet confirms this trend. For climate scientists, the explanation is straightforward. Greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels are trapping heat in our atmosphere. The resulting warming drives more extreme weather events. It is a human-caused crisis with human-available solutions. For those who view current events through the lens of Scripture, these extremes fulfill specific prophecies. The distress of nations, the sea and waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear. They don't deny the science. They simply believe the science is the mechanism through which prophecy unfolds. Regardless of interpretation, one thing unites both perspectives. Our world is changing faster than at any point in living memory, and the changes are accelerating. Now, let's step back and look at the full picture, because examining each sign individually is one thing. Seeing them all together is something else entirely. Waters turning red worldwide, locust swarms of biblical proportions, earthquakes devastating cities, blood moons falling on sacred days, mass animal die-offs, weather growing more extreme year after year. Each of these has been documented. Each is real, and all are happening simultaneously. So where does this leave us? There are essentially three frameworks for understanding what we've just examined. Framework 1, science and climate change. Under this interpretation, every event we've discussed has a natural, measurable explanation. Red tides are driven by warming oceans. Locust outbreaks are linked to unusual weather patterns caused by climate change. Earthquakes are geological, not supernatural. Blood moons are predictable eclipses. Animal die-offs result from pollution and habitat destruction. This framework treats each event as part of a larger ecological crisis that humanity has caused and can potentially solve. It requires no divine intervention, no ancient prophecy, just physics, biology, and human responsibility. Framework 2, coincidence and natural cycles. Under this view, nothing happening today is truly unprecedented. Red tides have always occurred. Locust plagues are documented throughout history. Earthquakes are constant. The moon regularly turns red. Animals have always died in mass events. What has changed, proponents argue, is our ability to document and distribute information. In 1920, a red tide in a remote lake would go unnoticed. Today, someone with a smartphone can upload the image worldwide in seconds. We're not seeing more signs. We're just seeing more of what was always there. Framework 3, prophetic fulfillment. Those who hold this view don't necessarily reject science. Instead, they argue that the prophets described what would happen without specifying the mechanism. If warming oceans cause red tides, and red tides turn the sea to blood, the prophecy is still fulfilled. The cause doesn't negate the sign. What matters most to this perspective is convergence. Not any single event, but all of them occurring together, in the same generation, accelerating in frequency and intensity. This, they argue, is exactly what Jesus described when he spoke of birth pains. Each contraction comes faster and harder than the last. And they point to something else. For nearly 2,000 years, these prophecies seemed impossible or abstract. Waters turning to blood. Worldwide locusts. The moon turning red. Today, for the first time in history, every single one of these things is happening. Documented, filmed, verified. We present these three frameworks because we believe you deserve to examine the evidence and decide for yourself. This channel does not tell you what to believe. We show you what's happening and let you draw your own conclusions. But we will say this. Whether you see coincidence, climate change, or prophecy, The fact that all of these phenomena are occurring simultaneously at an accelerating pace in a single generation is, at the very minimum, worth paying attention to. The ancient texts warned that these signs would come. They are coming. The only question that remains is, what do they mean for you? In our next episode, we go deeper, hidden in plain sight, occult symbols in entertainment, government, and corporate culture. Are they coincidence, creative choice, or something far more intentional? From music videos to architecture, from fashion to Fortune 500 logos, there are patterns that most people walk past every day without noticing. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. If you found this episode thought-provoking, subscribe to Biblical Mysteries and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and leave a comment below telling us which framework resonates with you most. If you haven't seen episode 1 yet, where we break down what Revelation actually says verse by verse, click the link on screen now. This is Biblical Mysteries, and the signs are everywhere.